I remember when I first met Jesus. My brother Andrew and I was fishing on the northern shore of Galilee when I heard a voice beckoning, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." As I turned to see who it was, my brother Andrew informed me, "It's Jesus, the one I told you about." You see, Andrew was a disciple of John the Baptist. He heard him proclaim, "Prepare ye the way of the Lord." He was there when Jesus came to be baptized. He saw the dove descending from heaven and landing on Jesus. He heard the voice proclaim, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." So when I heard it was Jesus, I was quick to drop my nets and follow after him. And for the next 3 years, I walked and talked with Jesus. I saw how his teachings awed the crowds. I was there when he confronted the Pharisees, and I saw all the miracles. I saw those who could not hear have their ears open. Those that were blind were made to see. Those that were crippled began to run and leap and walk. Even those with leprosy had their skin cleansed. And the dead were brought back to life by Jesus' command. Everything was going so well when we entered into Jerusalem. The crowds were around us proclaiming, "Hosanna, blessed is he." I thought for sure that this was the time when Jesus would establish his kingdom. I remember proclaiming, "Establish your kingdom, Lord." Shortly after that, we went to the upper room, and we were all surprised when Jesus said, "One of you here will betray me." We all looked around with amazement, saying, "Surely not I." Then Jesus told us, "The one that dippeth the bread in the bowl." And we looked in Judas. It was Judas, and Jesus said, "Do quickly what you must do." As he left, Jesus said it would have been better had he never been born. Whenever I heard that, I stood and said, "Lord, I would never deny you. I would never betray you. I'm ready to go to prison and even die for you." But you know what happened shortly after that. Later we were in the garden and we were told to watch and pray. But James and John and myself had all fallen asleep when Jesus came and woke us, and he said, "My betrayer is at hand." When I saw the guards coming with the priests and the soldiers and their torches, I jumped up with my sword and I tried to take the head off of the high priest's servant, but he ducked and I ended up cutting his ear off. Do you remember what Jesus said? "Peter, put away your sword. Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword." And then he said something I didn't understand at the time. He said, "I must drink from the cup my Father has given me." But all I heard was a rebuke. So I ran from the garden and followed Jesus from afar. And you all know what happened. I ended up saying I never knew this man Jesus. I ended up denying I ever knew him. The next thing I heard was they had crucified Jesus. I felt like my heart was being torn from my chest. The next 2 days, I cannot explain the darkness I felt. We were gathered in a room when Mary came proclaiming the tomb was empty. John and I took off and ran to the tomb. He outran me but stood outside as I went in and discovered the linen now laying where he was. We all went back to a closed room And there were those saying they had seen Jesus. Two from on the road to Emmaus said they had seen Jesus. Mary said she had talked with Jesus, and suddenly Jesus was in the room with us. He began to break bread and eat it. And I wanted to tell him how sorry I was, but before I got to him, he left the room without a door being opened. So I decided I would just go back to the only thing I knew, and that was fishing. Some of the other disciples went with me, James and John, and my brother Andrew, and we were fishing on this very lake. We fished all night, and we didn't catch a single fish. Do you know how discouraging that is? When suddenly, as dawn was breaking, I heard a voice from shore yelling, "Have you caught any fish?" "No," I grunted. "Throw your nets on the right side of the boat." I thought, what difference could 10 feet make? But we did. And to my amazement, our nets were full of fish, 153 in all. That's when John whispered, "Peter, it's Jesus." I put on my coat and jumped from the boat and waded to shore, only to find Jesus had already cooked our meal. After we finished eating our meal, Jesus began to question me. 3 times he asked me, "Peter, do you love me?" Finally, I said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And he told me to feed his sheep again. Then he told me when I was young, I dressed myself and I would go where I wanted. But when I become older, other people will dress me. They'll stretch out my arms and take me where they want me to go. I realized then he was telling me that I would have an opportunity to lay down my life for him. And then he said, "Peter, follow me." As I looked around, there was John, and I instinctively said, "Well, what about him?" Jesus looked at me again and said, "What does it matter if he lives until I return? Peter, follow me." It was then I began to understand. So many of the mistakes I had made as I followed Jesus was because I tried to lead the way. I tried to make decisions, and it wasn't my time to lead. It wasn't my time. It was then I realized the very first thing Jesus had said to me was, "Follow me." And the very last thing he spoke to me was, "Peter, follow me." We are called to be followers. Many around this boat, God has elected to be leaders, but first we have to be a follower. The secret to getting close to Christ is being a follower of Jesus. Sing this song with me. It's a song I've grown to love. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back.